Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reuse, Reject, or Replace UA events in a GA4 world. I'm hoping that everybody can see me, can hear me, and can see the slides. I'm really excited about this. We have people from all over the world. If you're in one of the parts of the US which has been hit so badly, boy, I hope you're doing okay. I know there's cold temperatures around the world, or at least in many places, but the weather we're getting here in the US is just crazy. So let's dive in. Tiny bit about Northwoods. We've been around for 20 years. We're located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We started as a software development shop, which I think is kind of interesting because we added the agency side later, about 8 years ago. And I love working in a place which has the digital marketing side and the strong back-end development side. It's really cool to have those two groups work together, sync together, and so it's a fun place to work. And I think most of our clients like us, so that's good. A little bit about me. I'll be your trail guide today. So my name is Fred Pike. I'm a managing director at Northwoods. I've been here like 15 years or so, and I lead up the Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager practice. Today, we are going to be talking about the differences between GA4 and Universal Analytics, which I'll sometimes call UA, I'll sometimes call Universal Analytics, or for short, GA3. We're going to talk about GA4 Event Types and spend particular amount of times on the recommended events. Then we're going to dive into the UA events, and I'm going to show you an example of how we're going to take those UA events and move them to GA4, along with steps to follow. And I'll end up with some thoughts on GA4 and some resources. So starting off, some differences. In Universal Analytics, there are several different hit types that get sent to Google Analytics. You can have a page view hit type, you can have an event, a social, an e-commerce, etc. GA4 has a different model. Everything is an event. Every single thing that gets sent to Google Analytics in GA4 is an event. And an event has two components: an event name, for example, page view, and event parameters, which describe that event name. So page location, page refer, title, things like that. And you can have up to 25 parameters per event. So you can really think about the power of GA4 having a lot of information to go along with each of those events. That's one of the real strengths and beauty of GA4 is how much information you can attach to those events. Now, GA4 has 4 different event types. The first are automatically collected. Like you're on the toll road, you've got that little transponder, and you can just buzz right through the toll booth. You don't have to stop. That toll is automatically collected. That's what the first level of GA4 events are like. There's 42 in total. 34 of those automatically collected events are app-related. Now, that makes sense because GA4 was originally called App and Web, and you can really see that in the automatically collected events. They're heavily app-focused. But 8 of those are web-related, like page view, scroll session, and 6 of those are what's called enhanced measurement. And if you've done anything with GA4, this will be familiar to you. These are the events that get configured automatically when you install GA4. So you've got page views, scrolls, outbound links, etc. And there's not much you have to do with these. As a matter of fact, there's not much you can do with these. You can turn off 5 of these. You can't actually turn off page views. That one is always on. You can't turn it off. The other ones are on by default, but you can turn them off if you wanted to. And you can configure the site search one a tiny little bit. So there's not much you do here. By default, they're on, and they just start sending information to GA4. The next type of GA4 event are the recommended ones. And this is where a lot of the power in GA4 really comes out. There's a set of recommended events for all properties. That would be all websites, all apps, etc. But there are also different sets that are broken out by different industries. For example, you've got a set of recommended events for retail and e-commerce, for jobs and real estate, for travel, for games. Now, you may think that those specific sets of recommended events for industries are unique, like the retail e-commerce one, for example. You look at these and they make sense. Add payment information, add to cart, add to wish list. What you'd expect in e-commerce, right? If you look at the travel and air one, you get the exact same events. So it's not that they're unique to each of those industries. It's just a set of events that may apply to those specific industries. And what do you do with these? Nothing with these happens automatically. You have to configure GA4 reporting to use them, or however you're getting information to GA4. But they're there, so if your site or app has features or behavior that correspond to these events, then use them. Google is saying use them. We've set up a framework for you. We've set up some events and parameters that you should use. So please go ahead and use them. And the final type of GA4 events are the custom events. With the custom events, you create your own event name and you create your own event parameters. But let me remind you, let me speak for Google here. When Google is talking about the recommended events, they're saying basically use these because these provide you with more detailed reports and let you benefit from the latest analytics features and integrations as they become available. And it's that last phrase that's critical, I think, here. Right now, if you use custom events or recommended events, there's basically no difference in GA4 in the UI. You don't see any difference. But at some point in the future, Google is saying, yeah, those recommended events, we're going to have specific reports for them. It's going to be easier to use them in the UI. So basically, as much as possible, when you're using events, use the recommended events rather than custom events. Now let's dive into Universal Analytics events, the GA3 events that we're also familiar with. And here's where we enter the GA4 casino. We get to see how lucky we're going to be. So you're in luck if you have no Universal Analytics events set up. So if I went into your GA account, your UA account, and I went to the top events report and I saw the flat line, so you're not recording events at all, you're in luck because at a minimum, you're going to get the enhanced measurement events. So you're going to have way more information about your account than you did before. You'll have the scrolls, the outbound clicks, etc. So you're in luck if you've not set up any events. You're also in luck if you've gone crazy with UA events. So here's a report for the event category, which shows 5,400 rows. Now, this is nuts. This is a really poor implementation of the events. The event category is supposed to be the big bucket. You should have maybe 10 event categories, maybe 20, but certainly not more than that, and certainly not 5,400. It's impossible to get information out of this account. So if you've messed it up like this and you have so many different event categories, then you're in luck because you're going to have just those 6 event categories or those event types in GA4. You're kind of in luck if you use gtag, the global site tag. Now, it's interesting, about 6 or 9 months ago, Google had a big push to tell people to start using gtag. And I didn't understand why they were doing that at that point. And the reason for that is that they were getting people ready for GA4, for the launch of GA4, because gtag works really well with GA4. It's a super simple configuration to add GA4 on top of gtag. Now, a lot of people may not know, but you can actually use events in gtag as well. And here's how you set up an event using the global site tag, using gtag. It's set up so that you say the event is going to be the action, and then the event category is category, event label is label, and you can send along the value. And here's where you can see that if you wanted to dive in a bit further. Let's look at an example of how this would work in real life. Here's the footer of a demo site, which we're going to show momentarily. Here's a reminder of what that gtag event should look like if we had set it up. And here's what is actually set up on that site. So on click, what we're going to be doing is tracking the click on the Facebook icon. So on click, we're going to call up gtag, the event of follow Facebook, the category of social media, and the label of footer. Okay? And that's what it looks like. So let's go live and see how this works with both GA3 and GA4. Here's my demo site. And if I scroll down to the footer and inspect that icon, there's my gtag on-click event. What I'm going to do is use the GTM GA debugger from David Vallejo. It's a Chrome extension. I'm going to use that to show us the GA3 and GA4 impact. So I'm going to start this up. By the way, if you don't have this Chrome extension installed, you really should install it. It's a great Chrome extension. I even did a YouTube video about it if you really want to dig in. All right, so we're going to start this up. And notice how the tool breaks things out into GTM information, GA3 information, GA4 information, and enhanced e-commerce. So I'm going to click on this Facebook icon. And we'll just close that. We're going to go to the GA tag. And look, there's the event. Let's take a look at that. Here's my event category, social media, event action. You know what? I'll even make it pretty. Oops. So here's my event category of social media, event action of follow Facebook, event label of footer. Perfect. So gtag sent an event to GA. What did it do with GA4? There's the event. Let's take a look at it. Follow Facebook. So here's the event name, follow Facebook. The event category is social media. The event label is footer. Great. So that same gtag event sent information to GA3 and GA4. But notice how it sent it. It sent it as a custom event category, that group that we're kind of not supposed to use as much as possible. Use the recommended, not the custom. And the reason it went as a custom is because there is no recommended event that has a name of follow Facebook. So GA4 did its best to interpret that. It actually accepted that hit and set it up as a custom event. So if you have gtag, all those events that you've labeled using gtag are going to show up in GA4, but they're all going to be custom events. All right, so that's the gtag. What I don't like about that, in addition to it being a custom event, is that the event action becomes the event name. That makes no sense to me at all. I mean, the event category is that big bucket, right? That's what I talked about before. That's what it should be. I don't understand why the event category didn't become the event name in GA4. But they didn't ask me when they built this, so I guess we'll have to live with the event action becoming the event name. All right. You're shit out of luck. You're SOL if you're using Google Tag Manager. All those wonderful events that you've set up in Tag Manager that you're sending to GA, all these events are invisible to GA4. None of those are going to show up automatically in GA4. It makes you want to just weep, cover your eyes, and say, oh my God, all that work in GTM, it's gone. So you have a tiny little bit of help here. And then we're going to look at the type of events that you can replace, right? So here's the GTM container that we at Northwoods use by default. This is our default installation container when we're setting up a new GTM container or integrating with a new client that we've taken over or whatever. Now, of these 15 or so events that I have in this container, 3 of those I'm going to replace with the equivalent in the enhanced measurement side. So the file downloads that I used to track, are now going to be done automatically with the file downloads enhanced measurement. The outbound link click to the outbound link click, and the YouTube videos to the video engagement on YouTube in enhanced measurement. So there are some events I'll be able to replace. But what about reuse or reject? Let's look at those next. And we're going to do that in terms of an example that we'll follow through here and a step-by-step process. So the first thing you're going to want to do is review your existing UA events. We're going to stay with the example of a social media click of some sort. And I'm going to use the Northwood site as an actual example of what we do here. So there's 3 different places on the Northwood site where we're tracking social media interactions. The first is in the footer. You can click on Facebook, or you can follow us basically on Facebook, Twitter, etc. The next is in all our blog articles, and I'll pick on one of mine as an example here. So if you really like this blog article, you can share it to Facebook, you can share it to Twitter, etc. Or with most of the blog articles, we have a pull quote, and it's an easy way for you to grab maybe the salient element of the blog article and click it. So our click to tweet, GA4's less is more approach works surprisingly well. If you like that, if you agreed with that, you thought it was great verbiage, which it absolutely is, then you could click to tweet that. So those are the 3 different types of social media interactions we're tracking. And the way that's set up in Tag Manager, we have the social media click to tweet, the social media follow, the social media share. The follow, of course, is from the footer. Now here's where we have to take a step back. And we're going to follow the wisdom of Marie Kondo. And I'm sure you're familiar with her. She's all about simplifying your life and figuring out if something that you own sparks joy. And if it doesn't, get rid of it. Thank it and get rid of it. So we're going to take this sparks joy approach to those social media interactions and see what happens. That first one, social media click to tweet, does that spark joy? Yes. To me, it does. That shows such a level of user engagement that they're willing to click or tweet that pull quote. I love that. So that one sparks joy. The social media share, they're sharing that whole blog article someplace. I'm weighing that. Yeah, that sparks joy as well. That I'm happy about that. The social media follow, where they're clicking on those icons in the footer, does that spark joy? I'm measuring it. I have to admit, nah, doesn't really do much for me. Sorry. We are going to reject that one. We're not going to move it forward to GA4. In fact, we're going to send it to Goodwill. So taking the Marie Kondo approach, we figured that one of these is not coming along. 2 of them, bring us joy, is going to come along. All right. The next step is looking at the GA4 recommended events. And again, the recommended events, because Google is leading us to those recommended events to use them as much as possible. So let's follow along with Google's direction here. So I'm going to look at the recommended events for all properties. And I start searching down the list. And I see, oh, share. That kind of sounds like a recommended event that I want to use when I'm sharing these blog articles or whatever. So the parameters on that are content type. Okay, that might be blog. And item ID would be, let's say, the URL of that blog or the page title of that blog or something. But this doesn't give us the information, the total information we need, right? Because I can both share a blog article or I can do that click to tweet. 2 different user interactions, 2 different levels of user engagement. So I'm sitting here thinking, what can I do with this? And by pure happenstance, I happen to be looking at the measurement protocol for Google Analytics 4. And the measurement protocol is where you can actually send hits directly into Google Analytics without having a website interaction. So they have a list of all the different events that you can send using the measurement protocol. And with the share one, I happen to notice there is a parameter called method. And this seems perfect for what I'm doing because the method in which the content is shared. Aha, I now have all the information that I need to really build the type of GA4 event that I think I want. So step 3 is to plot your events. I know that the event name is going to be share, and I know I'm going to use 3 different parameters. I'm going to have method, and there's going to be 4 different options here: share to Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or click to tweet. My content type is going to be blog, because on our website, that's the only thing that has those social media share options. And the content ID is going to be the blog name. Cool. So I'm now taking my GA3 event. I've transmogrified it kind of into a GA4 event. Next thing I want to do, step 4, is repurpose the GTM triggers. Is there anything I have to do to the GTM triggers for this GA4 event? In our case, we're using social media click to tweet, social media share as our triggers, and we actually don't have to do anything. Those same triggers are going to work for the GA4 event. Step 5 is to actually create that GA4 event. And obviously I'm doing this in GTM. I do everything in GTM. So it's going to be the event. I'm using the GA4 configuration, of course. My event name is going to be share. The parameters are going to be the content type, item ID, and method. And notice that blog is hard-coded because I'm only sharing the blog in our case. In your case, it might be a variable. The item ID is going to be the page path, the URL basically of the blog article. And the method is a click class that we're using on our A tags. And I'll show you what that means in a little bit. But that'll differentiate whether it's a share to Facebook, a share to LinkedIn, a click to tweet, etc. And then finally, to trigger that GA4 event, I'm doing the social media click to tweet and share. Okay, so I now have my GA4 event. And next, you're going to test it. You always want to test these things before you publish them or whatever. But in my case, I've actually published this already. So we're going to go and show you what it looks like live. Let's go. So here's the blog article we want to share. There are, here are the links, the Facebook, Twitter, etc. And here's the click to tweet. So the first thing I want to do is to be able to see it in GA4. I'm going to share, I'm going to turn GA debug on. So now everything I do is going to show up in my GA4 debug view. And notice that there's nothing there right now. So let's go ahead and click around a little bit. Let's click on the Facebook link. Wants me to log into Facebook, which I'm not going to. Same with Twitter, LinkedIn. All right, so I've done those 3. And let's do the click to tweet. There's that great quote, but we don't need to use it right now. All right, so let's see if that's showing up in analytics in my debug view. And whew, it is showing up, thank goodness. So we have the shares. We should have, there we go. Here are the 4 different shares I did, right? So let's take a look at just those shares. And the content type for all of them is blog. As I said, that's kind of hard-coded. The item ID is going to be I only did 1 blog, so it's only 1. There could be more. And then the method, here are the differences. Share Facebook, share Twitter, share LinkedIn, quote, click to tweet. That's great. The other thing you may notice is that these are shares, but one of them, the click to tweet, is also a conversion. And how do you do that? So while we're here, let's show you what that is. Actually, let me jump back to the slide.
Hey, Fred,
yeah.
Let me interrupt you just for 1 second. There's a question here. The GA debug on setting at the top, which you started, is this a plugin?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So this is a Chrome extension, the GA debugger, it's called. And if you go to, oops. The Google Analytics debugger. So notice it says remove from Chrome in my instance. In your instance, if you don't have it loaded, you would install it. So you absolutely need this if you're doing anything with really GA or GA3, GA4, GTM. It's a great little tool to have. So yes, that should be in your row up here of Chrome extensions. All right, so back to this momentarily. All right, so that was our testing. And in case it didn't work, I wanted to show you what it would look like, the content type, the item ID, and the method. So now we're going to register the parameters and we'll go back in. So what does register the parameters means? Those ones that we're using, the method, the content type, the item ID, those won't show up in your reports unless you register them within GA. And the way you do that, I'll show you that live. So we are going to go, again, we're in the live version of GA4. You're going to go to Events, and you're going to manage the custom definitions. And here's where all the parameters that you're using that are coming from the recommended events or even a custom event, you have to install them here. And if you create one, you enter the parameter name, and that's going to be exactly what you're using in GTM or whatever the actual parameter name is in the recommended event. And then for the custom dimension name, you can call that whatever you want. I tend to use the exact same name. So here's my parameter name, here's my dimension name. I tend to use the same one, as I said. So once you have these registered, then you'll start seeing them show up in the report. So let's look at yesterday as an example. If we look at the share event, we dive into the events section of GA4, and here are those parameters which I've registered, the content type, the method, and the item ID. So these things here at the bottom of this report, they won't show up in the UI unless you register the parameters. All right, so back to the slide here. So we register the parameters, we set them up here, we have them set up now. And then the final thing, oh, okay, so that's where you set them up. The final thing we're going to look at is the conversions. And we want to set those up to convert, we want to set some of those events up to be a conversion, right? To be the equivalent of a goal in GA3. And where you do that, again, is in the all events, create event. But let's show you this live. I think it's always better to show it live. I'm going to go back to my events. I'm going to do a create event here. So I have one event set up right now, a custom event, and this is where the power of GA4 really starts coming into place. You know, we have the share that is sharing to the share event, which shares to Facebook, LinkedIn, et cetera, and the click to tweet. I'm going to make just the click to tweet portion of that. I'm going to create a special event just for that, and that's going to be my conversion. So I'm calling it click to tweet. If we look at it, it matches when the event name is share, which we've seen, and the method contains, quote, click to tweet, that click class that I'm using. So that's why when we looked at the debug view, that's why that click to tweet showed up. So here's the original share, and because a subset of that share is a click to tweet, that becomes a goal, a conversion rather, in GA4. So I think that is so damn cool. That's so powerful. Now, let's do one thing here. If we look at that click to tweet, the method leaves a little to be desired. I'm actually grabbing that CSS click class, HTML click class, quote, click to tweet. That's not the best message. Let's look at how we can actually change that. So I'm going to go back into my events. I'm trying to give you a sense of the power of GA4 too and working with the interface. I hope that's okay. So I'm going to go back to that event. I click to tweet, and I'm going to modify this quote click to tweet. Add a modification. So the parameter I'm going to change is going to be method. And there's only one method in this example, right? It's going to be the quote click to tweet. So let's make that quote click tweet or something that's a little bit more understandable. I'm not sure if that's more understandable, but at least it's several words. So we're going to save that. The configuration is saved. Let's go back out and test that and see what happens. So I'm going to refresh this page. And let's do that. Click to tweet again. We can close that. Let's go back to GA4 and look at the debug view. It can take a little bit of time for it to come out. There it is. There's my share. There's my conversion. Click to tweet. This time, if I look at the method, whoa, look at that. I was able to change the method from quote, click to tweet to something that is a little bit more understandable. That is really cool. I think so, at any rate. I get excited by this stuff. All right. So I've shown you an event that becomes a conversion. Let's set one up from scratch so you can see this, because this is a really important part of setting up GA4, making sure that you create an event and that some of those events will become conversion points.
Hey, Fred, I have a question for you here that's, I think, apropos at this point. One thing I've noticed, we've got a lot of engagement here today, and a lot of our experts are answering other questions that have been posted in the chat. But here's one that I want to pose to you right now. Hey, Fred, I've got a question regarding conversions. I've been using my measurement plan for ages where I didn't have a couple of dozen event categories, but only a few. Let's say share was an event category. If I want to create two conversions, one for LinkedIn share, other for Facebook share, how to do it? Should I create a new event just the way you described right now?
Robert, that's a great question, and welcome from Croatia. Love to have you here. So I'm going to show you exactly that point right now. I'm going to create a new one for Facebook. So it's you teed it up perfectly. I'll have to pay you the $20 later. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to go into events, and I'm going to create a new one this time. And let's call this share to Facebook. Now, I believe the suggestions are when you create your own events, have it all be lowercase, and if you're going to have spaces or whatever, use the underscore, not the dash, and I don't think you should use spaces either. I'm not totally sure. You might want to mute yourself. Thank you, sir. Okay, so the event name is going to be equal to share, and the method this time, oops, and the reason I do contains, I'll tell you why I do contains, because for that other one that we saw, the quote click to tweet, for a long time I had it set to equals, and I had quote click to tweet in here, and it wasn't working. And in the debug view here, you can't really debug it the way you can in GTM, where you can look at why an event didn't fire. You don't have that luxury in GA4. And what happened is that class, that quote click to tweet class, had an extra space at the end, and because I was using equals, they didn't match. So I learned my lesson the hard way, and man, that took me a while to figure out. So now I just do contains, and it's going to be share, if I remember correctly. I hope that's how that class looks. And let's modify it now from the beginning. So the method is going to be share to Facebook. Cool. Let's see if this works. All right. So the other thing I want to do, because I'm going to set this up as a conversion, I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to go to my conversions and create a new conversion event. And here's where why I just copied it. So my share to Facebook is a new conversion event. Let's see if this works. Fingers crossed, right? Live demos and all that stuff. So the next thing I'm going to do is refresh the page. And you don't have to refresh the page. Ultimately, it does work, but it can take like 10 minutes for it to sync up. So I found that refreshing the page will make it work instantly, hopefully here. Drum roll, please. Here's a share to Facebook. We can close that. I'm not going to log into Facebook, but I am going to go to the debug view. And we wait for this stuff, page view, blah, blah, blah. It's not always the quickest here. There we go. Look at that. We have the share. We have a goal of share to Facebook, which we just set up. Oh, that is so damn cool. And if we look at the method there, it's share to Facebook. It actually worked. Man, I get so excited about this. This is really stupid, but it is so cool to work with the events within the GA4 interface, to be able to modify the parameter names, to be able to set up a conversion so easily. I just really kind of like this stuff. So that is the setting up a conversion and setting up a goal, or setting up an event. So hopefully, Robert, that answered your question. There's a good question here from Hannah. Do you have to set up events twice, once in GTM and once in analytics? So Hannah, so what we did in essentially, yes. Yeah. You set it up in GTM, you register those parameters in GA4. And if you want a subset of that event to be its own event or its own conversion point, then you have to set that up in GA4. If not, if you're just happy with that share and any of those 4 different share types was going to be a conversion, you don't have to do anything in GA4. It'll show up automatically, except you have to register the parameters. Nicholas asked, how do you get the debug view on GA4 dashboard? Never mind. As a matter of fact, Nicholas, interesting you asked that. Probably tomorrow, I'm going to have a video on our website that shows how to get the debug view working if it's not working. There's 3 different ways, and that video will be out tomorrow. I was hoping I'd get it out today, but other things, life got in the way. All right, back to our presentation. So there's how you set up the conversions, how do you create an event. And basically, in the PowerPoint, I show samples of everything in case the demo dies, which it does every now and then. And here's how you mark it as a conversion. Okay. So that's kind of the process to take the UA events, get rid of some of them, replace some of them, reuse that share, for example, and move them to GA4. Now, let me just spend a couple minutes on some GA4 thoughts. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but this little click to tweet, I think the more I work in GA4, the more I think it's really true. So I was at a Google webinar a while ago, and the emphasis with GA4 was to make it simpler. GA3 has over 100 reports. It's a really daunting interface for people who haven't worked with it before. People like us who are really familiar with it, it's great, but we're a minority. Most people who dive into GA3, it's really hard to figure out what the heck is going on there. So Google's approach with GA4, less is more, I think works really well. It's a simpler interface for the casual user. Person who just doesn't use it often, they can get in, they get some pretty good information out of it. But for the power users, the people who really knew the old GA well, you can do that through the Analysis Hub, where you have to create your own reports, but they're not that hard. You can do that through BigQuery. You can do that through Google Data Studio. So if you really need to dive in deep, you can do that building your own stuff. So I do kind of like the GA4 approach. If I had only one shot, only one instant, one day to set up GA on an account, and I wouldn't ever be able to touch it again, I would do it in GA4. And frankly, that's kind of shocking to me. But it is almost a set it and forget it tool. It's not quite, but it's close enough. And for years, I preached that GA is not a set it and forget it. You had to adjust filters. You had to adjust views. You had to make sure events were firing properly. I mean, there's so much that you had to do in GA, but you don't have to do as much in GA4, which I think is really kind of interesting. So I will pick a bit of a nit with Google on the interface. A lot of times they show the gender and the age information. And again, for the casual user, for the newbie, for the person who's not deeply ingrained in GA, you may think, oh, wow, 3/4 of our traffic came from males and 20 and a quarter came from females. That's good information to know. But if you dive in a bit further, and you guys already know the answer to this, the unknown is a huge percentage. So yeah, of the known, 75% of the people are visitors and 25 are female. But of the unknown, the 83%, who knows? So I wish that in this, every time GA4 showed something like this, it also had the unknown. So again, so the casual user wouldn't get a sense that Google actually knows the gender and the age of everybody coming to your website. As I said, that's a bit of a nit, but that bugs me to no end. So here I am on my soapbox preaching. All right. The other thing, and this is kind of interesting. So for the last 3 or 4 years, I've done a lot of work on GA audits, GA remediation, GA implementations, GA and GTM implementations and everything. So much so that last year, I created a course at CXL on becoming great at Google Analytics audits. And boy, I had a blast developing this course. I think there's a lot of good information in it. And it came out last June, I think. So when GA4 came out of, was introduced, came out of beta in October, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to have to revise the course. It's, only 4 months old. I'm going to have to revise it. Or I'm going to have to add to it or whatever. But the more I dive into GA4, there actually isn't that much to audit. Again, there's so many ways with GA3 that you can mess things up, as you guys know. I in my audit class, I probably only covered 50% of them because there are things I don't even know that how you can mess things up, but it happens. But in GA4, at least right now, that's much less. And partly it's because there are some things missing in GA4. We don't have the views. We don't really have filters to speak of. The filters we have don't have regex. There are definitely things missing in GA4, but it is a much easier install. And in terms of the audit effect of that, it's a way smaller thing. So my recommendation, at a minimum, if it's not clear yet, is that you should be double tagging your site. We're doing this for basically all our clients now. We're running Universal Analytics and we're running GA4 at the same time. In most cases, it's a very simple add-on to your existing GA3 implementation. It's simple to add in GTM. It's super simple to add in gtag, although I don't know too many people who are just using gtag, but whatever, it's easy to add. And at a minimum, you're going to start getting historical data in GA4. You're going to start getting used to the interface, which is very different. You're going to start being able to play with the Analysis Hub and play with BigQuery and play with GDS for the GA4 side. So run them side by side. For any serious analysis, I'm still using GA3. I'm still using Universal Analytics. That's where we've set up really great implementations. But we are running GA4 for everybody. Let's see. Yeah, so a question on enhanced e-commerce, that's coming up in just a bit. So some resources that I want to talk about. First of all, I rely a lot on the Google documentation now, and there'll be links to this in just a bit, but just running through here. So this has been really helpful to me because, frankly, when it came out of beta, there wasn't that much information about it. There are a few blog articles and stuff, and obviously that's becoming more and more popular now. But so I've relied a lot on the Google documentation, which is pretty good. So this one about events, this one on the measurement protocol, I think is very good. And this is kind of interesting. There are now a couple of courses that are around GA4. Now, this screenshot is from Super Week TV. If you're not familiar with Super Week, it's a week-long analytics fest in Hungary each year. And this year it was virtual. It was a 24-hour virtual event. And I was the host for 3 hours of that and just had a blast. At one point, I had 2 guests on. I had Charles Farina on the left and Jeff Sauer on the right. And Charles actually has a GA4 course on CXL. So if you want to learn about GA4, you could look at his course. And Jeff is just coming out with a course now too. And it's in process. I've gone through the first part. I think it's pretty good. Now I'll tell you, I love Charles Farina. I've learned a lot from him over the years, and I love CXL. But I don't know what happened to his CXL course. The editing is really bad, and like 40% of the time, the last part of his sentence gets cut off, and it bugs me no end. But there's still good information in there. Jeff Sauer, I have to admit I'm biased. I learned 5 years ago, I took his GA course. When he was developing it, I was in a beta run of it. And like he would film a class one day and I would take it the next day. It was so exciting. So I've always appreciated Jeff's teaching style. And I think his new GA4 class is going to be really good too. But the good news is that there are now beginning to be resources around for learning about GA4. And Krista Seiden has one coming out too. I just saw that too. So back in October when there wasn't much, now there's more. Some other resources that I just want to mention, and again, you'll get a link to this. Julius at Analytics Mania, I don't know if you know him. He's done a lot on GTM with his GTM courses, which are fabulous, by the way. But he has really developed a lot of blogs around GA4. And if you're not following him now, sign up at Analytics Mania. His blogs are excellent. He does a blog and a video on everything. He's really diving into GA4, and I couldn't recommend him higher. He's also a friend, so again, I'm trying not to be biased, but I really loved his stuff before I even met him, so I don't feel it's too biased. I'm blogging and videoing about this too, so add me to your list. That'll be on the list too, on the resources we share. Okay, enhanced e-commerce. So there is the official Google documentation. As usual, Simo has a really good guide on it. And then Matteo Zambon, if you're not familiar with him, he runs Tag Manager Italia. He's really big in Tag Manager in Italy. A great guy, but he's got a really easy UA to EEC to GA4 EEC conversion guide. And I've used that, and it actually works pretty well. Plus, Ken Williams blogs about this a lot. And if you're new to BigQuery, there's a great site called GA4BigQuery.com, which has sample SQL statements, basically, that you can use against the data. Because, you know, I'm not much of a SQL guru, although I think I'm going to become more of one. Okay. So that is that. So handouts and resources. Oh, I see a question here. So do you set up Google Search Console within GA4? That's an excellent question. No, there is no integration to GSC in GA4. So that's another one of the things that's missing. Yeah. So, but I would still set up Search Console regardless and have it on the UA side and in its own, of course. So handouts and resources. First, I'm going to ask for a favor. I'm so used to doing these webinars live. Well, no, I'm so used to teaching live, and now we're doing everything through a webinar, of course. When I teach live, I get feedback from the audience. I get a sense for what's working or not. It's much harder in the webinar to do that, obviously. So I ask you to please fill out this survey, and I really want to get some feedback on what worked, what didn't work, other topics you'd like to see, things like that. So if you fill out this survey, ooh, you get a link to the PPT deck. Wow, the PowerPoint deck. You get a link to a PDF of that. Isn't that cool?
Wait, there's more.
There is more, Jim. Thank you. Thank you. Spin the wheel. You also get the resources, a link to the resources that I mentioned, which of course you can find by Googling it too. So, but whatever, it's really valuable because it's branded with Northwoods. And you'll get this webinar recording as well. So please fill out the survey for these valuable tools. Oh, and maybe I'll even throw in a link to my pandemic banana bread recipe, which is one of the videos. Yeah, one of the videos I did for Super Week. So that, please fill out the survey. I'd love to have you do that. So Jim, any questions that I missed?
Great. That seems to be all the questions for now, Fred.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody. Hope this was useful, and I'm actually kind of excited about GA4, so hopefully that came across. I really appreciate everybody taking some time out of their day, and feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to check out our GA4 Hub on Northwoods and follow me on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So thank you much, everybody. From Milwaukee, from a frozen Milwaukee where we got another 6 inches of snow today, this is Fred Pike signing off.